Hi, this is Keith Hurlbert, and this is I'm giving a narrated version of the presentation that was given at the Iowa County Emergency Services Association on July 12th, and making this because there were a number of emergency services members who weren't present at that meeting. I want to make sure everybody has the information, this information about the uh, WISCOM system change that's now going to happen after getting through the state budget process. So I'm going to narrate this so there's some explanations for folks rather than just words on a screen. So we're gonna be switching WISCOM in the state of Wisconsin to 800 megahertz. The Office of Emergency Communications, which is an office that is under the umbrella of the Department of Military Affairs, has taken on this project and are pursuing the switch of WISCOM from VHF, which we are today, to 800 megahertz. We're going to talk about this through this presentation, what this means to us. This system will also include a VHF overlay, which will be a simplex channels. And we've used that term in the past, and it simply means that there's no repeater involved for those channels. It's radio to radio. However, this system is going to have what they call a VHF overlay, where they're going to mount receivers up on towers, certain towers in the county, that'll allow a unit on a simplex channel, and these are specific simplex channels that have been identified by the WISCOM folks, and you would transmit on that channel if you're a Grant County unit coming into Iowa County, or some other surrounding county that's going to provide mutual aid. And you would use the VHF overlay system to communicate with our dispatch. They would have that particular channel patched into a talk group, which would then, of course, be coming over the talk group, and there could be back and forth communications that in that way. There's some drawbacks to a VHF overlay, and of course it's still simplex. Range is substantially less than a repeater type channel, and the ability for units in the field to talk directly back and forth together on that channel is pretty limited, hence the need for putting it on a tower, letting that transmission get to dispatch where they can patch it into a talk group and transmit it over to the wider coverage area of the repeater system. There is a good thing with this is that the system does come with the L3 Harris Beyond app, which can be put on your phone. And for a one-time $250 fee, your phone can be turned into a radio. And so you can talk back and forth on the system and that kind of thing. Not You're not sure of all the details involved with this Beyond app yet, so just know that that capability will be there. We don't know if it's going to be able to be put on personal phones or it just has to go on agency phones, and a number of other details that are still unknown. Stay tuned. Uh, this will require, because we're changing frequency bands from VHF to 800 megahertz, it will require every mobile and portable radio to be replaced with an 800 megahertz capable unit. There's going to be some local expense to do this. If we stay with WISCOM, and we're not saying that we are, and we're not saying that we're not at this point, and that'll come a little further in this presentation. But up front, 800 megahertz requires hardware to be changed in all the fire apparatus, all the squad cars, all the ambulances, even the dispatch consoles. Everything gets changed, including the repeaters, antennas, and base stations and stuff in the tower sites. So it's a very comprehensive change to the WISCOM system, and it's going to affect us for, right up for many years to come if we stay with WISCOM. So just we're trying to be as thorough and upfront as we can be about what's going on, but yet there's still things we don't know. So the WISCOM was passed, or the WISCOM change or update, as I'll call it, was passed in the state biennial budget. The RFP from L3 Harris that the state has accepted as the winning bid was approved or came in at $95 million. The state approved 45 million in the 24-25 biennial budget, with all 45 million being available in 2024. They are saying that the additional dollars that will be needed to finish the project will be made available in following the following year's biennial budgets. So apparently the state can operate that way. Schedule and method of build out. So they're going to take the regional approach to build out on this thing. They're going to start in the southeast corner of the state, likely in 2025. For the next year and a half, up to that point, there's going to be a contract signings that have to go on negotiations before they do that. And then in 2024, there's going to be final system design stuff that has to get done before they even begin any sort of build out of the system. They're going to start it in southeast Wisconsin. Why? Because there's no daily users in southeast Wisconsin. So they'll be able to put the system up in place in a section of the state and hopefully work out any tweaks that need to be worked out. Phases 2 through 6, which would include daily user counties coming online, 2025 to 2029. That would be the timeline for seeing any of those counties and non-daily user counties with just WISCOM towers. Usually those counties have 1 or 2 towers in them. That those towers would be converted to 800 megahertz as well, which of course, if the county that they're in is VHF, which 95% of the counties in the state are, then they'll be unable to use those WISCOM towers unless they change out their hardware as well. Most of those counties that aren't daily users use the WISCOM system very, very lightly. And generally, it's to monitor weather from the Weather Service, because our Weather Service uses RTAC 11, or it's rare mutual aid events that take place. Anyway, phases 2 through 6, 2025 to 2029. So it'll be a few years down the road before Iowa County would see any changes. So what happens going forward? You know, we're a bit spinning our wheels a little bit here at the sheriff's office and in emergency management, trying to figure all this out as well. It's just the information's coming slow. We're trying to absorb what we can and pass it on, but there's no definitive answers in some areas yet. So the state's going to be meeting with daily users individually for specific needs or concerns. We have a meeting coming up. The date hasn't been set yet, but we have a 22-page site survey to fill out before that meeting coming up here, where they're going to tour our dispatch. They're going to look at the Dodgeville Tower site and all that kind of stuff. And then we're going to have a conversation, I would assume, about specific needs or concerns that Iowa County has in regard to the WISCOM system. And I think voicing our concerns about conversion to 800 is water over the dam. We've done that. We've voiced our concerns to the legislators. We've voiced our concerns to the people at DMA, and it still went through. So with that said, now we need to voice concerns we have with the proposed system and see how we're going to handle some of the anticipated expenses that are going to fall on the county or local municipality side of the line. WISCOM contract signing, as I mentioned, is going to likely take place this fall or winter with L3 Harris. The state took the request for proposals from the vendors. L3 Harris won that based on their proposal. Now there's a final contract negotiation that takes place this fall, winter, before that gets signed. The concern that we have is that they're not going to sign a contract till they know what the daily users are going to do. And they're going to push the daily users to make a decision here before fall or before winter anyway, and to whether they're going to commit to the WISCOM system or not. So we're now in that phase where we can see things starting to come. We just don't know how to make this decision yet. It's there's things that we need to be doing to see if there's alternatives that are uh, better for everybody financially or better for everybody as a communications system and its coverage and its capabilities. Would it be better to go on our own? Would it be better to somehow take over the current system we use, take it from the state, and manage it ourselves? I mean, what are our options? And we've been talking to people about these options for a while now, but we couldn't do anything solid until we knew for sure that the WISCOM system update was going to be funded by the legislatures. And so, with that said, now that they've done that, we're sure now that this is going to happen. So now vendors will talk to us anyway. In the summer of 2024, detailed design review will take place. That's going to take up a lot of 2024. This includes tower placements and coverage maps and all sorts of other things that go on with that. So it takes quite a while to work through those things, especially if you're going to try to lease space on towers, which the state will be doing, and working with those cellular carriers. I can say from personal experiences is more than just a challenge. So I wish them luck. I mentioned when we'll have to commit. We anticipate this fall, winter sometime. Um, we don't know for sure what we're going to do. User fees. User fees have been taken off the table. None will be charged. There were all sorts of rumors over the years that this RFP process started back in 2017. And if you had any conversations with me back at that time, there was some pretty astronomical user fees proposed to be used for maintaining the system. But back in 2017, the proposals that were being put forward were to keep the VHF system, just make it better, more coverage, and that kind of thing. And that evolved into a new person coming into the Office of Emergency Communications. That person changed the direction from keeping the system VHF to going to 800 megahertz, and he's responsible for bringing it to where we are today in this process. But good news is user fees are off the table. Should we stay with WISCOM, that is not supposed to be an issue. The system comes with a 95/95 guarantee for daily user counties. This is a daily user counties are getting some special attention from the state in that they're making sure that they have 95/95 coverage with a portable on the hip. They've raised the bar on this from what we used in 2011 for the VHF system in the bar by raising the body loss percentage that would likely be put on a radio signal if that portable's on the hip. So um, this sounds much better than what we have from this perspective. Again, it's 800 megahertz, so there are some issues with 800 megahertz radio signal compared to VHF and how far it travels. So they have some convincing to do to be able to, for us to sit back and say, okay, we feel comfortable with that. Up front, in looking at the what's been laid out for Iowa County, should we stay with this? Up front, the coverage looks excellent. At a closer look, and when you zoom in on the propagation mapping, there's a hole in the Avoca area again because there's just terrain and geography up there just creates this area where the village of Avoca is. And we're not real sure we've got good coverage in that Rui area. So we want to make sure that that we make that known that we would prefer additional towers located in those areas. We also have a possibility we could request an ISSI connection for our current hybrid system, which is the PS1 Law 1 and PS2 Fire 1 channels. and we would be able to we would keep that system at the county's expense and use this computer interface, the ISSI, to marry up the 800 megahertz system and the hybrid system. So we could use that as maybe a mutual aid channel for units coming in from out of county, because it is VHF conventional digital, and also use it to help expand coverage if there's a weak area, something like that. And 95-95 is much different than 100-100. 95 means 95% of the time in 95% of the county, you'll be able to transmit and receive with a portable on your hip. But there's that, it's not 100-100. So if that hybrid system were to be kept in online and it would help fill in some areas, all the better. But these are just a couple of comments and observations I've made about this up to this point. How many towers are slated for Iowa County's system? 13 total. We would retain ownership, or the county would retain ownership of the site at Dodgeville, but all equipment that would be inside of that site, as far as radio equipment, would be owned and maintained by the state. The building itself, the HVAC, the heat, the generator, and the tower structure itself, of course, would be still maintained by the county. But it does take the onus off of the county for responsibilities for some very expensive radio equipment that's in that tower site. This is a coverage map of the 13 proposed sites, and the white areas of where they could have coverage, no coverage, or limited coverage. Maybe, it's one of those areas where you walk 10 feet and you got coverage, and you walk 10 more feet and you don't. But the green areas is showing what we have for coverage. And this is better by what we had in 2011, but from the VHF system, a little bit better coverage. But there's a couple of commonalities here, and then one area is around Avoca, as I've mentioned already. Arena gets filled in because they put a tower. They go from the Spring Green tower that's north of Spring Green, a couple of miles, down to a tower that's on Thule Road, just about maybe 3/4 of a mile to a mile north of the river. Bringing that tower closer to the county, which fills in some of this area here in Arena. Then they're also putting a tower in Arena that is it's a bug tussle tower, I believe is what they'd be using, possibly a US Cellular. Blue Mounds would still exist. Hollandale would have a tower. I believe it's on County K south of Hollandale. The Mineral Point US Cellular Tower would still be used. This is the area here where I would like to see something additional for the Rui area, but we'll see if that would be something they would entertain. The Dodgeville Tower site here and Highland Tower still exist. There's 3 towers in that Governor Dodge area. There's an area there that there's 3 towers that they wanted to incorporate to help cover not just Governor Dodge, but other areas around it as well, and trying to get down into that Wyoming Valley areas as best we can. And then it looks like maybe the Hippenbecker Road Tower comes back online. There's a US Cellular Tower up there that the state might utilize to help fill in that northwest corner of the county. So anyway, this is just a quick look at what the tower locations would look like. This is what we call propagation mapping, and it's just to show the potential coverage based on the number of tower structures where they are by GPS location, and they have an estimated height, I would guess, on each tower, because height makes a difference as to where antennas are located. But this is what they're showing us at this time. Another thing that comes out of this for the county at this point was, and we've just purchased new E.F. Johnson VHF dispatch consoles, and they now would be obsolete once this system starts getting built or is put into functionality in Iowa County. Should that happen, we replace all dispatch consoles with the new L3 Harris version of a dispatch console that works with 800 megahertz. The state is funding that. That's any consolation. When does the county need to decide? I guess I've already mentioned that it's probably going to be fall, winter. We're going to have to commit to this system in order to be eligible for any state grants that become available to help fund radio hardware that goes into the fire apparatus and the police squad cars and ambulances and such. So there's going to be that. That we, another reason that if we want these to stay with WISCOM, we've got to make this commitment to be eligible for these funds. There'll be more talking about the grant program here shortly. Shutdown of the current system. There's no defined decommissioning date for the EFJ system. They're at least talking about keeping it up online, the VHF system, through minimum of 2029. And so we'll see how that plays out. Things can be sped up if counties agree to go on and everything gets finished a little bit ahead of time and there's all the kinks are worked out and agreements are worked out. They could happen sooner. L3 Harris says they can have it up and running in 3 to 4 years, and the state's telling them, no, we're anticipating there's going to be some time needed to get funding to fire, EMS, and law enforcement for the conversion of their hardware in their equipment in order to be able to communicate on this frequency band. So the state's saying 5 to 7 years. We went on the system in the current system in October of 2012. So we are now in year 11. At 5 to 7 years, we're going to be in year anywhere from 16 to 18 years on this system, which, at that point, I would start thinking that we would be looking at doing something. So this is coming much earlier than we anticipated and literally had little or no control over this. So the subscriber grant systems, the subscribers, meaning the subscriber units are the radios that are in all of the apparatus and other equipment in the county. The original grant proposal that was made to the legislature to find funding for it in this biennial budget was to provide grant opportunities to the daily user counties at 70% of the total funding they provided. They were going to give 70% of that funding to the daily users to write grants to replace the radios that they already have on the digital system, the trunking system on the VHF side of the world. They only appropriated $2 million for this biennium, and it's only available in 2025. Well, I'll show you in a little bit, but the $2 million is going to fall way short, even for Iowa County. It's going to be way short from funding enough hardware to switch all of Iowa County's public safety people over to 800 megahertz. We're not even talking about public works, which there's a number of those that have made the change as well. So this is a lot frustrating in that out of the whole legislative process and all of the negotiations that went on at the Joint Finance Committee and everything that's been happening with the legislature, Howard Markline and another legislator from up north are the ones that proposed this grant program, and it looks, at least up front for this biennium, it's going to fall way short. So this slide shows an example of what it could potentially cost a department to replace all their radios with this grant program. I'm giving you a 20% version, which is the first yellow area, and I'm giving you a 50% match version, which is the second yellow area. You can see that currently in the system, Iowa County as a whole, altogether, we have 230 mobile units in the system, and we have 733 portables. If we were to replace all those in a 20% match scenario, $669,800 would be the match requirement that countywide for all entities countywide. If you break that down to an individual department, I used Barneveld as an example because I'm familiar with what they have. Barneveld would have 16 portables and 16 mobiles and 37 portables. They would cost them, over in the far right column, there's 20% match, would be $16,022 with a total of $38,200 to come out of the local coffers in the match requirement to replace all of their radios. By the way, this does not include installation or programming. Installation and programming would be in addition, and the new system would be locked down to only certified vendors that will be allowed to do radio programming. So any of us that have been doing programming over the years for radios are getting locked out. We're not going to be allowed to do it. We have to be on a certified vendor list for doing that. Second scenario is down further, the second yellow area, if it was a 50% match, because we still don't know what this grant is actually going to be. We just know that $2 million has been tossed out there for now. We know that this is going to go on for several bienniums, so that number could come up substantially in the next budget negotiation, but we don't know that. So a 50% match scenario would put Barneveld at spending $95,500 to replace all of their radio equipment. So substantially more money for them in a 50% match scenario. Again, I mentioned this earlier, the system would have the gateway products in the daily user counties provided by the state, not by the county as it currently is. And we would be using the Beyond app to be able to use your telephone as a radio to transmit and receive on your telephone. So the Beyond app though has a one-time $250 per phone fee to be able to use it. We don't know much more than that about it at this point, if it's going to be required that it's an agency assigned phone rather than a personal phone, or if personal phones will be able to be used. We don't know those specifics yet. We just know that the Beyond app is part of the RFP. And the last slide I have here is about the VHF overlay, and I've talked about this just briefly, but I just want to reiterate. This is being sold to the daily user counties as the methodology for interoperability with counties around you that aren't 800 megahertz. It's a very weak, in our opinion, it's a very weak way of doing this. It's simplex channels. They've got 3 different channels. VMed 29, VLAW 31 are 2 of them. I can't remember the third at this point, but doesn't matter. They're still simplex channels, meaning there's not a repeater to boost that signal. And they're telling us that they're going to put these voter relay type systems on some of our towers, but not all of them. And that signal, if a VHF unit comes in on that channel, VLAW 31, for example, they will definitely be able to talk to our dispatch center if they can hit one of those towers. Dispatch could then patch that channel into a talk group, an 800 megahertz talk group, and there could be this conversation, two-way conversation from units in the field and back and forth as we normally do. But they're still simplex channels. There's still going to be issues with coverage. The system's not designed for great VHF overlay coverage, and it's concerning to us because we are going to be surrounded by VHF conventional digital counties. Grant County is going to be VHF conventional digital. Richland's going that way. Sounds like Sauk's talking about it. Greene County is, Lafayette County is. So, and of course, Dane is the trunking Harris system. So that's VHF as well. So there's some concerns we have with interoperability with our neighbors, and we use those neighbors quite often, right? When we talk about bringing, um, Muscadet EMS and fire into Iowa County and Spring Green Fire and EMS into Iowa County, they've got to have equipment then that works with both 800 megahertz and VHF. So that's now you're talking multi-band radios, and a multi-band mobile is $8,500, and a multi-band portable is $6,500. Kind of it's going to get really expensive for those guys. So there's a weakness here. It may be one of those things where we can negotiate better coverage from this, but even then, looking at that tower system that's proposed for the south end of the state or the south end of the county, because of terrain, it doesn't require as many towers. This VHF overlay will take a hit down there because there's just not going to be enough towers for a radio to possibly hit. That's our opinion on that, or my opinion anyway. And just want to make it clear what this is if you hear it talked about. So in regard to anything else, at this time, we've pretty much told you what we know. Our next, meaning the county's next steps, Mike Peterson, Sheriff Mike Peterson, myself, we'll be discussing and talking with vendors on what our options are. If we keep the VHF system we have, what does the state want to be able to do that? Will we be able to keep equipment in the Highland Tower site? We don't know. We don't know if that's going to be possible. Will we be able to keep equipment in the Blue Mountains Tower site? If we do that, are we going to have to be building towers? And when we start doing those things, that's just driving up the cost of going away from WISCOM instead of making it a more economical thing for us to do. We like the trunking system, right? The dispatchers like the trunking capability because it gives us more channels. We don't have to have 10 repeaters at each tower site to support 10 channels. We have 5 repeaters and we have 15 talk groups of different types, and they're supported by those trunking repeaters because they're juggling those transmissions, and you're grabbing a different repeater on one transmission versus when you transmitted the last time, and that's how trunking works. It's juggling these transmissions and you're using whatever repeaters available to transmit on that talk group. If we go to a conventional digital system, that means we have to have a repeater for each channel we have. So if we wanted to have a 10-channel conventional digital system, we would have to have 10 repeaters in each tower site. That's going to be expensive because I can tell you that the conventional digital repeaters that we have in the hybrid system sites are about 30 grand a repeater. So if we start looking at $300,000 per tower site, and we're going to have 10 tower sites, we're getting pretty pricey. So the reality is we've got some decisions to make here in the relatively near future, and we have to get some numbers together so we understand exactly what the smart decision is. So we just want to make sure everybody's aware what's going on. This is something that is being imposed on us by the state because of the county's decision to go with WISCOM years ago. It was the best route to take back in 2011 from a financial standpoint. There was no way the county was going to be able to afford anything else, so that's the way they went. Now we are seeing some of the issues with taking that route, in that the state can impose their will on us without consideration for whether we can truly afford to stay with them. So here we are. We presented this at the Wednesday night meeting. We wanted to make sure everybody gets the information, so I'm putting it out here with an impromptu narration of this PowerPoint. If you have any other questions or concerns, I realize there's probably concerns. I know money is always, that's a no-brainer. So You don't even have to call me at me and yell at me about money. We understand that. But if you have any other questions or concerns, or you even want to talk about money, fine. But what we would really encourage is that those legislators in Madison that are making the decisions on how much you're going to spend to convert to WISCOM, the ones that took that grant proposal and knocked it down to a $2 million number for 2025, they should be hearing from you. Your fire chiefs, your EMS chiefs, your law enforcement heads, and your local government heads should be hearing from you. We talked to those people from at the county level. We made our concerns known, but we need numbers now to make sure that if we're going to go this route, that they're hearing you and that they know that there is a dire need for financial support in making this switch for the daily user counties. I think they've kind of missed the boat on that. The proposal that was made would have been pretty good if it would have been done at the right level, but it's not going to be pretty good if it stays at the current level of $2 million in a biennium. So with that said, this was Keith Hurlbert. And again, if you have any questions, email me, give me a phone call. Be happy to chat. Thank you.